If you didn't already, look like most of you did, little half sheet of paper should have picked up when you came in. We'll go over that here in a little bit. We're going to take a look at your prompt, the first one that we're going to do for Grapes of Wrath in your course syllabus, and identify any potential concerns you might have. I don't know if when you walk out of here today, I'm pretty sure when you walk out of here today, you still won't be convinced and completely understanding of what it is that you're going to do for your rough draft. I think by the time you walk out of here tomorrow, you'll have a pretty decent idea of this is the direction you need to go. It doesn't mean it'll be smooth sailing, and there might not be any like little challenges along the way, but I think you at least have a better idea of what it is that you're supposed to. I think today you have an idea, and I think tomorrow things will be better. Remember, tomorrow we are going to do the quiz for Chapter 5. So we'll take the quiz. That'll be the first thing we do tomorrow for Chapter 5. You can bring in some notes if you want. That's perfectly fine. And then we'll finish up the stuff that we start going over with today with the first prompt. The idea with going over Chapter 5 tomorrow is we can kind of do on a small scale analysis that you're going to do big picture when it comes to the whole entire thing. So we'll go over some stuff today. Tomorrow, finish that up. Focus really then on Chapter 5, and then kind of go through the whole process of what you would want to do for your draft. Remember, the paper that you're doing for next Thursday is a draft. It's not a final copy. It's not a scribble, I'll put some ideas in here later kind of draft. It's a full working draft. It's a full working essay to the best of your ability at that point. But know that it's not the one that's going to be like formally assessed. The draft, and this would hold true for both of them that we'll do, it's going to be 15 points, and that's what like the rubric that you have here. So you could get a 15 out of 15 next week, and your essay might not be that good. You get a 5 out of 15 because you didn't do everything you needed to, and you can still end up having a really good essay. So don't take the rough draft score as, ooh, that's what I'm going to get on my final copy, because those are going to be like two different entities going on. So we'll do that quiz tomorrow. Remember, by Friday, I want you to do the survey on Google Classroom. Looked like most of you were able to get into Google Classroom at this point. And then you would want to just kind of fill out that survey for me by the end of Friday. And then, rough draft we'll end up doing next week. So any timeline questions? Okay. A couple things with Google Classroom, since most of you are able to get there now. As year goes on, and days are going to happen where you kind of miss stuff. Usually every day I'll have a daily agenda up there, so in case you didn't know what's going on, you should be able to see the date and know what's happening. I did add a template to you for your essay, for your rough draft. Your version will look a little different than mine because it's going to have your last name with it. So, crown over, I think it'll go dash MLA template. That means that you have that template now in your student Google Drive. And that's where I would type your rough draft. I know some people like typing in Google Docs, other people want to type in other apps and all that kind of stuff. I would go in this one for the simple fact that A, it's set up for you, it's ready to go. So you would put in your name. I got the page number, the header ready to go for you. You'd be able to fill in the date, all that kind of stuff. And then I also have the Works Cited page started for you, at least that the page is there, so you shouldn't forget about it. And I have the formatting the way that you would need to do it. So I would type your draft in here. It does a couple things. One, I can see how you're doing. No, I'm not going to sit there every Tuesday night and see, did he add anything in? Oops, he's typing now. Yeah, you can give him a comment or something like that. But final copies, you submitted to turnitin.com. Eventually some kind of little computer glitch is going to take place. So Medina tries to submit her essay at like 10:30 at night. She's having some kind of issue. She's not going to stay up for an hour and a half dealing with turnitin.com. She goes to bed. I have access to her essay, so I know that it's done, and then we can get it submitted at the right time. As opposed to someone going, I tried to submit it, but it just wasn't working. I take a look at their essay, because you have like 2 sentences written. You didn't really do anything yet. So it's a fallback plan in case there are any kind of technical glitches that would take place. Plus, you have questions leading up to your due date. Rather than Alex copying and pasting a paragraph or sharing a document with me, I already have it. It's already organized by your name. It's easy for me to pull it up and then you take a look at it. So it kind of cuts out some of that stuff. So I would suggest strongly doing that. If you don't do it, I'm not going to dock points for you, but if you end up having turned it in issue, I might not be able to help you because I don't have a copy of your essay. So unless you know if it's on Google Docs. If you work out at the library at home, you have access to it. So, but that's up there in Google Classroom. You should have a copy of it now in your drive. And as I said, it's automatically shared for you and all that kind of stuff. The other thing that posted on there as well, not that you want to relive yesterday, but yesterday's lesson is on there. It's recorded. It's just us talking about a syllabus more than anything else. But when you walk out of class, that made sense. I'm good. Then you sit down in front of the computer and start writing, and writer's block shows up because you forgot every little nugget of information we went over. The clip might help you a little bit with kind of going over some of that stuff. So like us talking about the prompt today, it might seem useful come next Wednesday when you're trying to finish up some ideas for your rough draft. So on the side, recorded lessons, number 3 is where I keep all those things. If you forget your book for some reason for the Grapes of Wrath, I have like a digital copy of the book right there for you. Page numbers aren't the same, but at least it's better than not having a text at all. So if you're missing something, always check here first, check in with me, and we can make sure you're good to go. Any housekeeping stuff? All right. So your checklist. So the points here are just kind of letting you know total points. Everything ends up adding up to 15. There's really no reason why you shouldn't be able to get those 2 points for type times New Roman 12 double space, because I did that for you on your template. So just keep going. You should be okay. Not every essay is going to be 5 paragraphs. Don't tell Mrs. Washington. But this one will. So we're going to go intro, conclusion, 3 body paragraphs. So you get points for having those. Within each body paragraph, this point right here, I want at least 2 direct quotations, 2 quoted passages in each paragraph, and then there would be a 3rd specific detail that you'd be citing. So from a citation standpoint, you have at least 3 in each body paragraph. It's always gets to be confusing for people. So you have at least 2 direct quotations. That doesn't mean it has to be dialogue. You can quote narration, stuff from the expository chapters. That is fine. Besides those 2 direct quotations, I want at least 1/3 specific example. So it is specific enough that you would need to put a page number to identify where in the text you're looking. So your 3rd example would not be the Jodes' lives were miserable on the trip, page like 48 through 574. Something specific. So if you want to look at the death of Grandpa, if you want to look at, if you didn't know he died, you're really far behind. If you were looking at when Noah decides to leave, you're not quoting any particular passage, but you're looking at a specific point in the text. That would be like a 3rd citation. Some people, I think, out of fear of messing up, just do 3 direct quotes. I'm okay with that too. So if Zach decides I want to do 3 quotes, I'm not going to worry about that 3rd specific example, whatever he's talking about, you're okay. What you could not do is, well, so how many direct quotes do you need at least throughout the whole entire essay? 6. You need at least 6. And then you would have to have at least 9 citations total. What you can't do is have 3 quotes in your first body paragraph, 1 quote in your second, 2 in your third, and go, I have my 6. The minimum would be to have at least 2 for each body paragraph. If, say, you decide to do 3 direct quotes in your first body paragraph, 2 quotes and a 3rd example in your second body paragraph, you're okay because you're meeting the minimum requirement. But you can't, switch it to 1 quote and 2 direct examples. For math, this gets to be a little bit of a struggle. Since you're dealing with 9 citations, we'd like equal support from the expository and the narrative chapters. So the narrative chapters would be the Jodes. This would be like the commentary chapters that take place. You can't divide 9 by 2. And it doesn't mean that you have to throw in a 10th example. But if you have a 4-5 or 5-4 split, that would be okay. So your whole essay is not going to be solely about the Jodes, nor are you going to ignore the Jodes and only write about the expository chapters. I want you to get a mix of both. You might have a paragraph that's all Jodes. You might have a paragraph that's all expository. That's okay. But when it's all said and done, you got that 4-5, 5-4 split. If you need symmetry and you want to throw in a 10th cited example, go for it so you can have your 5 and 5. Mrs. Kane would be happy with that. She likes symmetry. works cited page, you have that at the end, then you got your 2 points. So the idea behind this is, you know, if you forget your works cited page, you're looking at a 13 out of 15. You know, if you forget to have it in Times New Roman, you're looking at a 13 out of 15. This will go in as participation points, and then when you turn in your final copies a couple weeks down the road, that's when you'll get into the specific essay grade. Works cited page, everyone would have the grapes of wrath. If you're using anything else, then you would cite that. So some of you only have one source. Some of you might have a direct quote that you're going to use as an attention grabber. You might cite your history textbook to include some information about the Dust Bowl, whatever the case may be. Besides now okay, what do I have to write about? Any issues? For this one, paper copy on Thursday, because we're going to do rough draft. So you need to come to class with a paper copy so we can do a little small group peer editing, all that stuff. So not electronically submitting it. Don't just type in the template and be like, hey, I'm done. We need to print out a copy. It's not going to write you password on the library or anything like that. So looking at the prompts now. So this is page 6 in the big syllabus. Probably going to want to have a piece of lined paper also to kind of jot some stuff down. If you need any paper, it's always back of the room by where the hall pass is. Don't do this to your syllabus, but I'm crossing out prompt number 2. Because we don't need it. Oh, we got like a sine cosine graph going. Fun. So prompt number 1, in a carefully argued essay, analyze at least 3 rhetorical devices, diction, imagery, details, figurative language, and syntax, to name a few, used by Steinbeck to convey his attitude toward the impact of the Dust Bowl on the migrant people, and that impact could be positive or negative. What, if anything, from there do we have questions, issues, problems, or like you think you understand it, but you just want to make sure? What would be any concerns? Or what do we know? Like even, I have to do this.
What's syntax?
That's fine. You said, what is it? Yeah, good question. And I would, not to say that you don't know what the other ones are, but the easy answer is to say, well, they are all rhetorical devices. But what would be examples of those? We'll get to that here in a couple minutes. Good question, though, with syntax. Easy answer, sentence structure. What does that mean within the course of the book? We'll get to that part here in a little bit. But what do you have to do with your rhetorical devices? You have to choose 3. So it's still important to know what syntax is. But after we talk about it, you go, I don't like this. What could you do? Not choose it and choose 3 other ones. So those are 5 options. It's actually more than 5 options. You probably have about 15 options that you would potentially know how to do. Syntax is usually the one that people are least comfortable with early on. And it's the one that I have the hardest time explaining. As you read more, do more, you start to pick up on it. But we'll get into some examples. So we got to find rhetorical devices. And what do those rhetorical devices have to do? This is when you can like restate the prompt and still be correct. I got to analyze them, and I want to find devices that specifically. Okay. Now, if you were to choose 3 rhetorical devices, and I'll show you how to write a thesis sentence tomorrow, and in that thesis statement you go, these convey Steinbeck's attitude towards the impact of the migrant people, I'm going to go, that's a terrible thesis statement, because that is so general, so vague. So really, even before you start identifying what rhetorical devices you want to use, once we know what they are, the first thing you really have to figure out is what is Steinbeck's attitude about the effects of the Dust Bowl, the impact. So what do you think is some his book? What does he think about what's happening to migrant people? And when we say the Dust Bowl, we're basically talking the context of the whole entire book. So that's California is still going to be part of the Dust Bowl within our scope. So, Steinbeck see good things, bad things, good and bad things. Yeah. And I put positive and or negative, and I would suggest choosing one of positive or negative. Don't feel the need that you need to cover both. I put that though to remind you that there are some positive impacts that do happen. Doesn't mean when it's all said and done, wow, that was a heartwarming story. Life was grand in the 30s. But there were some positives that, even though it was a difficult time, did come from it. But the last thing you want to do is make things more complicated than they need to be. So I would ultimately probably choose one or the other. Heath, you said mostly bad?
Yeah.
What would be some bad effects about the Dust Bowl?
Like the fact that the farmers and stuff, they weren't getting like much food. This is when like the drought was happening, so obviously they weren't able to grow much like fruit and produce. And this is when like big industries also started like growing food and keeping them out. That's why the banks and stuff had to push them out because of the big landowners. Or not the big landowners, sorry, the big industries.
What would be a word that I could put in there? Big industry blank kicks out the tenants. Like an adverb. Something to describe the kicking out. I mean, that'd be a sentence or at least a phrase that I need, but you know.
I'm trying to think of adverb. I can't think of one. I mean, like full, partially.
Quickly, we said partially,
Forcibly.
forcefully,
Yeah, forcibly.
like without callously, like without caring. Yeah. You could do unfairly. You know, we don't have to show off our language enrichment knowledge, but you said harshly, Grant? Okay. So why did I include harshly or unfairly or apathetically or whatever? Back to the prompt, what is that telling me?
Yeah, it's just like that.
It's negative and it's giving me Steinbeck's attitude. So I wouldn't need to write, yada yada, big industry harshly kicks out the tenants and go, and Steinbeck thought this was bad, because it's pretty clear. If it had gone, big industry rightfully kicks out the tenants, then we would get the idea that Steinbeck supports that. He doesn't. So choosing a term here, it doesn't always have to be an adverb, but you can incorporate what that overall attitude would be. So you don't have a redundant sentence coming after it, and this was bad, or Steinbeck didn't like this, whatever the case may be. But you could write a whole essay about what was the impact of big industry, kicking out the tenants. We could even kind of go a little bit further. By the tenants being kicked out, what happened? So I don't want to just focus on the fact that they were kicked out, but what's a further impact by them being kicked out? Okay.
And in some cases, they couldn't afford food, a lot of them were starving, and they're homeless.
You're going to hate this question. Why? Like, why couldn't they afford food?
They couldn't
They lost their way of life.
Like, when they were in California,
They didn't have income.
could they have had food?
Yeah.
Potentially. Yeah. And in some cases, what happened to that food? Chapter 23.
Is that the one with us?
It's thrown out,
The industry's burning.
and it's even, the
Right.
kerosene gets dumped on it. And so you have picture this, starving people, excess food. Starving people, excess food. Generally, we would think, hey, we have excess food, give it to the starving people. No, we're going to burn.
Not
That was
really.
for inflation, right? Like kind of the, I don't know.
People's rights.
Yeah.
Well, it keeps the prices up, and also, even though that you have U.S. citizens going from one state to another, how do the people in California view? They don't call them Oklahomians. Okies. Okies used to mean you were from Oklahoma. Now it means you're, scum and all that kind of stuff. So part of it is also we don't want those people having our food. So you could take a look at the unfair treatment of the migrants. What does unfair do? Gives the negative connotation, the negative attitude, as opposed to the treatment. All right? Anything positive happening? Or anything that you think Steinbeck would like to happen out of all this? I don't know.
The I turned to a movie, which is like everyone hiking.
That was a funky chapter. What do they mean when I turns to we?
That each individual family, like by itself, couldn't overthrow anyone, but together, like the law could
Okay? And so basically you have separate families, and it didn't always work the way that maybe we wanted to, but separate families were able to come together as one big unit. You could keep it in that way as families coming together. Those of you who like political stuff and take AP, U.S. government politics, you would go, ooh, that's the S word. Socialism. Where some of you start getting excited, I can write about that. Others are going to go, I don't want to write about that at all. At which you can look at the families, coming together. Politically, what would you say that Steinbeck probably is doing with some aspects of socialism? See thumbs up or thumbs down? He's thumbs up. He's thumbs up. So, what could be, in Steinbeck's maybe hope, what could be an impact of the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression?
Shows the benefits of socialism.
Again, that could kind of be scary. You could do something like endorsing or endorses a change in economy might be tough because everything, all your examples have to come back to an economic aspect. You could go with something such as government, and that would allow you to incorporate economic things, but not solely have to focus, on them. So you could take a look at, okay, this could be a positive impact. And this is a little different from what I think Emma was saying, but you could go the dynamics of the family changed. You could have a negative where what did the Dust Bowl do to families? Sometimes it brought them together, but then Connie, Noah, Tom, deaths of, grandpa, what happens? They break apart. So you could kind of look at the impact, positive or negative, on families. You are certainly by no means limited to these ideas here that we have, but when you see, okay, what's the impact of the Dust Bowl on the migrant people, these are becoming much more specific as to what that impact is, as opposed to saying the Dust Bowl impacted migrant people. So, doesn't mean you know which one of those you want to do. Again, it doesn't mean you're limited to those, but it gives you an idea as to what we mean by an argument. Does that part make sense? Really, the first thing you have to do, after you've read a book, is decide, all right, what is the impact of the Dust Bowl on the migrant people? What is the argument that I feel I can support the most? Keep in mind, you are analyzing Steinbeck. You're not writing a literary critique. You're not saying he was right to do this. You're just simply saying this is what he's doing within the book. So you're still staying very objective. You're not supporting his argument, or you're not going against it. You're just identifying this is what he's doing, and this is how he goes about doing it. How he goes about doing it, those are the rhetorical devices that now we're going to start to get into. All right? So going vertically on a piece of paper, we're going to write our first keyword of the day or of the year. It's fun to say. Diddles. So when your parents or guardian or grandma or little sister or dog says, "What did you learn in school today?" you can say diddles. If your parents and your dog and your hamster and your stuffed animals have given up asking what you learned in school today because you always say nothing, you can go home and go, "I learned diddles." And then they'll say, "What is that?" And then you'll respond with,
What you're about to tell us.
did fist doesn't sound right, so that's why we use the L in figurative language for diddles. So it's an acronym. These are all rhetorical devices. This essay that you're going to be writing, and the one after that, and the one after that, are all going to be rhetorical analysis, meaning you analyze the rhetoric. And the rhetoric is the way a person constructs his or her argument. It's like you've already heard this. So these are your kind of like starting points. Not every single rhetorical analysis essay is going to focus on diction, imagery, details, figurative language, and syntax, but it's a good place to start. As throughout the course of the year, you're going to become more comfortable with it. You're going to be picking up on other kinds of devices that are getting used. You'll infuse them in. But this is kind of a place to start. But to start, we need to know what they are. What are they? You want to have a definition for diction? Word choice. You starting to look in the literary terms. But a lot of types of syntax are. Word choice. And really, it would be like specific individual word choice. Because here's the thing. You could say Steinbeck uses diction in his book. Guess what? All writers use diction in their books, novellas, short stories, plays, whatever, because they use words. So really, with diction, you're looking at the impact of specific words. So for example, we were using diction when we were coming up with adverbs. I said harshly, you didn't. Or no, you said harshly. Yeah, I said unfairly. Apathetically, forcefully, I think was one. Forcibly, but the words all the same. You were choosing individual words because they have a connotative meaning to them. So when you look at diction, you're analyzing a specific type of word that shows up in the book because it carries more, has more of a presence, has more of an impact upon the reader than just some other word. Heath is my acquaintance. Heath is my friend. What's the difference between the two? Besides both being false. Right? Yeah. And you could even take that a step further where someone could go unrelated, Heath is like my brother. He's not, but there's a closer relationship than just a friend, a closer relationship than just an acquaintance, a closer relationship than just the guy who sits next to me in English. Feel no need to use any of those terms when you describe it. Feel free to use whatever term you want when you describe your own brother. So, diction, you're looking at the impact of individual words, all right? Where contrast that with syntax, you're looking with syntax at sentence structure. So individual sentences, or individual words for diction, you're looking at sentences when it comes to syntax. And that could be a whole bunch of stuff. Opening lines to A Tale of Two Cities. No, that is not the opening line.
It was the best of times, it was the worst of times.
I thought you were going to keep going there. It was the age of innocence.
Age of wisdom.
out the opening line.
Several. There's a lot of them.
I tried to
Yeah.
block it.
How would you characterize that sentence? Not like emotional impact, but what type of sentence is that? It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It could be a whole bunch of things. It could be paradox, because how can it be the best and how can it be the worst? It can also, the way that it's written, another P term, it's written in parallel structure. Throughout the rest of that opening, statement, there's a lot of, I think you might have just said it, repetition. All of those things can be syntax. Paradox is kind of on the line. You can put that in some other categories, but it's still something that you could write about. The absence of, to have a sentence, what do you usually need? Words. First word should be you write a sentence, the first word capitalized. You should end with some form of punctuation. If you have dialogue, you need to have he didn't listen. Because he has not all the time, but and when the jokes speak, you get quotation marks. And the expository, it's hit and miss. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. So for syntax, it could be the inclusion of something such as punctuation. It could also be the absence of something such as punctuation. Now, it doesn't mean that Nina now, I understand syntax, I want to write about it, but there's a lot of different things that do go into it. So if you have sentences or paragraphs where there's a lot of repetition, that would be a syntactical technique. Alliteration, assonance, those are all examples of syntax. And Nina, going back to your what is syntax? Because tomorrow and Friday we're going to look specifically at chapter 5, we're going to come up with examples for all of these from chapter 5, so it gives you a better idea of what examples would be in other chapters of the book as well. Okay. Imagery, you're appealing to senses. It doesn't just have to be sight, it could be any of them. Sight tends to be probably the most common, but appeals to senses. In most of Steinbeck's books, did you read Pearl last year?
Yep.
You still had to do that one. Pearl's terrible.
Yes.
The old man and the sea.
In a lot of Steinbeck's books, the landscape almost kind of becomes a character. He does that in the Pearl. He does that quite a bit within this book. So a lot of the narrative chapters, there's descriptive language about the landscape itself, the changes that would be taking place in imagery. There's certainly a lot of imagery description about children, especially those like we're talking about in California where they are hungry. And that could be anywhere, not just California. That would certainly be imagery. The fruit being burned would be examples of imagery that would be taking place. So anything that's going to be appealing to the senses. Details is the one that folks kind of go, I think everything's a detail. From a rhetoric standpoint, details tend to be more of something that you use in nonfiction writing, although they certainly do exist within this book. Basically, they are facts. If, Josh, you mentioned earlier about the economy, like within an argument. If a president or a person in the cabinet were giving a speech about the thriving U.S. economy, what's probably going to be included within that speech? Some type of statistics. Doesn't have to be numbers, but statistics tend to be good examples of details. I'm a little leery of details. By all means, you can use them. The concern that I have with details is sometimes people will use it as a catch-all. I don't know what that's an example of. Ooh, it's a detail. I'm going to put it in there. Now, certainly when you are looking at the changes of wages or prices, those are details. The amount of acreage that's getting destroyed by the tractors, in chapter 5, that would be details. What's in circulation that is making the people want to go to California? those golden handbills. And so there's numbers about how many handbills and numbers about workers and then numbers about available jobs. Which number is the greatest? The handbills. And then the number of migrants, but the smallest number is the number of available jobs, which means if you have a large demand but a low supply, what number also can shrink? The wage. I'll hire you for 10 cents. Nope, I want a quarter. Megan goes, I'll take 10 cents. There we go. So those would be detailed statistics that you can include. It doesn't have to be numbers, but that's the most common kind of detail that gets used. But any kind of like fact that is getting used. Figurative language. Also kind of a bit of a catch-all. What would be different types of figurative language? The first three that you probably learned ever in your lives. You started off with a simile, and then you learned about a metaphor. And then, ooh, wait, here's a specific kind of metaphor. Personification then kind of popped up. But you're in advanced placement, English language and composition, so you know a whole bunch of other types of figurative language. Hyperbole, yeah. Ooh, we don't hear that one too often. Grant, you know what metonymy is?
I always mix up those and the synecdoches.
Thank you for not saying synodoche. That would put you in American lit.
I always mix up the two, so just remind me what they are.
I gotta remind myself how to spell them first. I misspell words all the time. I don't expect anyone to use metonymy and synecdoche, so don't feel like, what are those? They're types of metaphors. Synecdoche, I think, is the easier one. It's when a part represents a whole. So, nice threads means nice clothes, okay? Or, hey, look, yeah, you got new wheels, meaning you got a new car, not that you actually got new hubcaps. So when the all hands on deck would be an example of synecdoche. No, we just don't want your hands on the deck. Metonymy is when a closely associated like object or concept now represents something else. So the U.S. government, the president is declaring war. We don't, well, you could say the president is releasing a statement, but a common thing would be the White House is releasing a statement. The House is not literally releasing a statement, but we associate White House with presidency. If you're in Great Britain, you associate the crown with, you know, the monarchy and whatnot. So when you have a closely related object representing something else. Mike Tomlin is head football coach of the Steelers. The coach before Mike Tomlin, which now is getting close to like before you people were born, which is really scary. Anyone know who the coach was before Mike Tomlin? Sad. His name was Bill Cowher. He had a prominent chin. So they would literally go, the chin said, and it's not that the chin was speaking, but you knew that meant Bill Cowher was speaking. Or the chin was not happy. Irony would be examples. In A Tale of Two Cities, which we don't talk about all the time, but since we started about it, you have repeating concepts, not from a syntactical standpoint, but you have like color imagery keeps coming in the book over and over and over again. So that is called a motif. You have symbols. Emma, you were talking about the I to we. Within that chapter, there's a lot of allusions being made. With Paine, Marx, Lenin, Jefferson, those are all allusions that are happening. There's a lot of religious allusions that exist within the course of the book that we'll talk about later. So figurative language is a whole host of allusions. So ultimately you pick three. Now, you do not pick figurative language. You pick a type. So Heath could choose simile, you could choose synecdoche. Josh could choose personification, hyperbole, and irony, and those could be his three rhetorical devices. So he could choose three types of figurative language, but you're not going to use figurative language as just a catch. We'll talk about this more tomorrow after you take your quiz chapter 5. Remember, remember, if you want to bring notes, that's perfectly fine.